Welcome to We Are Not Scientists, the podcast brought to you by three space and science enthusiasts zooming in from our three locations around planet Earth. I'm Simon, and as always, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our guide on this voyage to Destination Curious. Beaming in from Mission Control in Deepest Darkest Devon, it's our commander, LP. Hello, LP, are you there?
Hello, Simon. Yes, reading you loud and clear. Loud and clear.
Excellent. And again, somewhere from a top secret underground bunker under the Canadian Arctic, surrounded by her family of servers, is Krystel. Are you there, Krystel?
Hi, guys. It's lovely to hear your voices.
Great to hear you guys. Great to hear you too. Before we start, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping. We're now on Twitter. @Wans2001 is our handle. @WANS 2001. Get that, guys? 2001.
Very nice,
@Wans 2001. If you want to get in touch, follow us. You know, we're following lots of people as well. Send us a message. Suggest some stuff for us to talk about, perhaps. Just get in touch. Be good to hear from you. Now, it's been a while since we all got together as the We Are Not Scientists crew. And blimey, there's been a lot happening, guys.
Yes, Simon. There's been an awful lot of stories that you may have come across in the news. Everything from planets being spectacularly close to Earth at the moment to new theories about black holes. So very, very interesting.
But we'll get to all that later. As always, to kick off, LP, as commander, you get to choose this week's topic of discussion. What will it be?
Well, Simon, this is an absolute personal favourite of mine. I thought we could talk about astronomy.
Now, LP, a lot of people get confused with astronomy and tend to think you've been dabbling with fortune telling.
No. I mean, the first thing to point out is astronomy is categorically not astrology. The definition of astronomy, for anybody who has any doubt out there, is the scientific study of celestial objects and phenomena. So basically, we're talking about like looking up at the night sky and looking at stars, planets, galaxies, nebulae, and asking questions like how are they formed, how long do they live for, how do they move and interact. So yes, definitely not the study of predicting the future because of the way a distant star is moving. No, not that at all.
I'm sure I heard something about Mars being in retrograde, and that's supposed to make me really emotional. We're not going to be delving into that today?
That was not my intention, no. Purely in the realms of scientific fact and knowledge.
So, who was the first astronomer?
Well, I mean, if you want to really go back in time, I would say the Aboriginal Australians are some of the very first astronomers, actually. Their culture goes back something like 50,000 years, and they've been using stars as ley lines, as socio-cultural astronomy, as stories, as history. It's really fascinating stuff.
That was a great word there, Krystel. Can you say that again for our listeners?
What, socio-cultural astronomy?
Yes, no, I really like it. It's not a word I'm familiar with, but it ultimately explains, I suppose, ancient monuments like Stonehenge. You have these sites that have both spiritual and practical reasons, I suppose. Spiritual because the movement of the sun and the moon, they would probably seem like gods to these people, but they also needed to understand those movements and when to plant crops and when to bring harvests in. It was probably the way modern society was able to actually form, because we would have used the passage of the stars as a clock or a calendar to know where we were.
I think there's like an astronomical knowledge within the Aboriginal communities that's just been passed down as a spoken history. So not only, when I say socio-cultural astronomy, it's not only just the movement of the stars and when they come up and using them. It's every single star has a story, and actually there's astronomical knowledge that they can recognize stars up to the fifth magnitude. So, their knowledge is just incredible.
For anybody out there who's not familiar with the term magnitude, when we talk about stars, we're essentially talking about how bright or luminous they appear from Earth. And basically, it's a logarithmic scale. So every number on the scale is like 100 times greater or less than the number that preceded it. So you could look at like one of the brightest stars in the sky, Sirius. I think that has a magnitude of about -1, because it actually starts in the minus. The lower the number, the brighter the star. And then you go right up out to the most dimmest stars you can see with your eye, a magnitude of 5, right out to really dim objects that you need very powerful telescopes to see. So just to explain that term there.
All these thousands of years ago, there were no telescopes. So when did these kind of start coming into play?
The telescopes, well, optical telescopes. I believe it was around the sort of the 16th century, and the first person that pointed a telescope at the sky was Galileo Galilei, the guy who discovered the moons of Jupiter. Although I don't believe Galileo actually invented the telescope.
No, he didn't. In fact, you are correct, Lawrence. He didn't. The first known patent of a telescope was from 1608, a gentleman named Hans Lippershey. The patent is really funny, actually. The title of it is "For Seeing Things Far Away as If They Were Nearby," and that's a quote. That's actually what it said. And then it was Galileo who was fascinated. So the patent wasn't actually granted. And people all over Europe got really, really excited. They started hearing about this incredible new thing for seeing things far away as if they're nearby. And Galileo got his hands on it the following year, improved it, and was one of the first to turn it to the sky.
So yeah, and very, very rapidly after his telescope, he drew very detailed maps of the moon, because nobody had ever seen the moon that close up to really see its mountain ranges and its seas and everything. So very, very very amazing to be the first human to see the moon in that detail. But where he actually got in a lot of trouble was his discovery of the moons of Jupiter. Up until sort of, around that period, we had astronomers like Nicholas Copernicus, who came up with this idea that the Earth actually orbits the sun and not everything orbits Earth. But Galileo sort of basically proved that there was a planet out there, Jupiter, that was being orbited by other objects, which kind of very much challenged the Catholic Church's kind of view of the way the universe worked, and was seen as quite ungodly. So, but fortunately, he had some powerful friends, so he was put under house arrest for many years, but wasn't actually tried for blasphemy. He kind of got away with it, sort of. But no, he's a big hero of mine, because again, he was not scared to go out there and challenge the status quo for the advancement of human knowledge.
And I assume while he was on house arrest, he did a lot more looking at the stars, right? Was he allowed to use his instruments and make all of his amazing discoveries in that time, or was he completely restricted from it?
No, I believe he was allowed to continue with his studies, but it was just he wasn't really allowed to publish or talk about his findings very much. And it was probably later, after he had died, and the theories that he came up with and his observations, actually, they just became accepted, and then his work's been published time and time again. So yeah, but no, an absolute astronomical great that really, like I say, pushed human knowledge forward massively.
Where would be the best place around the world to visit to have the best view of the night sky?
Well, I suppose, firstly, anybody can go out into their back garden or backyard, and they can look up at the sky. And even in a major city like London, you can see objects, planets such as Jupiter, bright stars. So you can still do astronomy in built-up areas, but really, you want to be as far away from light pollution as possible. So in the UK and in sort of the West Country where I live, Dartmoor is a great place, because again you're up high, you're far away from major settlements where there's a lot of light sort of interfering with the night sky. Tip of Cornwall, another great place if you go around Cornwall. And of course, if you go to the tops of Scotland, wherever you're far away from human light sources, the better. But probably on planet Earth, the best place is probably the Atacama Desert in Chile. It's very high and it's very dry, which it has something. It's like, I don't know, it's like has like 320 days of clear sky every night. So and that's actually where a lot of the very large ground-based telescopes are based. It's tops of the volcanoes in Hawaii, places that are well up above the normal cloud layer. Because again, the planet Earth is surrounded by a dense atmosphere, and it's that dense atmosphere that causes, as we see it on Earth, stars to shimmer. It's basically just almost like trying to look through a fog. So the higher you are and the drier you are, the less atmosphere you've got to look through. So yeah, they're the kind of places you want to be visiting if you want to see the best the sky has to offer.
I've actually read that Tuscany is quite a good place to do a bit of stargazing, and a little bit easier to get to than the Atacama Desert, I reckon.
Yeah.
But there are around the world things called dark sky sanctuaries, and these are places where light pollution is completely limited. So you can kind of look up these lists, and if you really want to see some impactful skies, there is probably one nearer to you than you realize. Actually, LP, there is a dark sky site not too far from you. It's in Cornwall, somewhere called the Roslin Observatory. So that might be a good opportunity for you to get out of the city and see a real dark sky site.
Take us to your back garden, LP. What can you see from there, and what kind of kit have you got?
Well, I'm quite lucky because I although I live in a city, my back garden, there's quite a lot of clear land between that and the next houses, so I get an amazing view of the sort of southern sky. Most people know the constellation Ursa Major. You might know it as the Great Bear or the Big Dipper. It's pretty hard to miss, but that's kind of in the northern part of the sky. As is Polaris, the North Star. But if you look into the southern part of the sky, that's where you get all the constellations that come up. They change, so you get Orion come up in winter time. The summer triangle come up in summertime. Lots of things in between. So yeah.
I didn't realise that Orion just came out of winter. I didn't know that.
Yeah, you won't see him at the.
I did wonder. I kept looking in the sky like for the last 6 months, thinking I just can't see Orion anymore.
Yeah. I think you can see him at about. I think you can see him at about 4 a.m. at the moment. He's just started to come.
That's
up,
not going to happen.
But he'll get lower. So.
So when you're looking at the night sky, what's the kind of like iconic things you're looking for as a kind of like a first timer?
I might have said this before, but the moon's always a great place to start when looking, getting into sort of stargazing. You just need a pair of eyes, and you can already make out surface detail. But if you want to go a bit further, the planets are always fascinating. They tend to be pretty bright and easy to spot. Then you've got sort of bright stars. We've got stars like Sirius, which you'll see if you know how to find Orion and the 3 stars of Orion. Sort of if you're in the northern hemisphere and you look down and to the left, you'll find a really bright star. It's often known as the twinkle star because it's quite low in the sky. That's the actual brightest star in the sky from our sort of where we observe it from. It's not the biggest star, but because it's relatively close, it does appear very, very bright. And you can actually, even with your naked eye, you can see a different galaxy. You can see the Andromeda galaxy.
Wow.
With the naked eye. That's the furthest thing you'll see unless you start using equipment. I think it's about 2.5 million light years away. So it's a fair old.
Wow. Have you ever seen it with your naked eye?
Yes.
No
I don't know
way.
where to look. It's obviously, as the name would suggest, in the constellation of Andromeda. But yes, if you know where to look.
Where were you in your back garden?
To be honest, not in my back garden. No, I was on Dartmoor. But
wow.
If you knew exactly where to look, you'd probably just about make it out. But in terms of planets, you'd be able to, from your back garden, you can see Venus, you could see Mars, you could see Jupiter, Saturn. quite clearly.
They've been really visible recently.
They have, yes. I mean, Jupiter and Saturn have kind of been almost like paired together for the last few months, and you'll see that sort of in the southwest part of the sky as the sun sort of sets, and then as shortly afterwards in the southeast you see Mars come up, which is really, really bright at the moment because it's so close to us. It's as close to us at the moment as it will be until 2035, I believe. And then also, if you get up just before dawn, and I love this kind of time of the year, this kind of couple of weeks before they put the clocks back here in the UK, and you can actually get up at sort of 6 o'clock like I normally do, and you get a good sort of hour of early morning astronomy in. Nothing like, just getting your day off by quickly looking up. And I was greeted by a very bright Venus and a slither of a crescent moon quite close to each other in one part of the sky, and I could look at the other part of the sky and just see Mars beginning to set. So really kind of gives you some perspective on our solar system and how it works.
Well, who doesn't like to be woken up by a very bright Venus?
Indeed, Simon, indeed.
And what about constellations, LP? Because I find, it's all well and good looking at single astronomical objects, but I really like the constellations. When I look up to the sky, I'm looking for the Big Dipper. I'm looking for the Little Dipper. I'm looking for Cygnus the Swan, or what is it, Draco? There's some amazing things in the sky. It's not just about Orion. He's not the only guy who's hanging out up there.
Orion's always the one, and I'm quite guilty of this actually. You look up in the sky and you're like, oh God, I can't look. Orion there? That's Orion.
No, like taking all the credit.
You're been here for ages.
I mean, you're absolutely right. There are such rich places to look in the night sky and so many different constellations. But Orion does tend to hog a lot of the limelight. I mean, the Egyptians, they believe the pyramids of Giza, they represent Orion's belt. He has a very powerful impact on human society even to today. And you tend to find, I actually was talking to an astronomer, a professional astronomer at Jodrell Bank a few years ago, and we were just talking, and she mentioned that when she sees Orion come up in the winter, it's like almost an old friend coming back. And I totally sort of could see exactly what she was saying, because it's the way I feel, because he is somebody who isn't there all the time. He's only comes into our view for a certain part of the year. But what's really important about Orion, and if you're into amateur astronomy, if you can go a bit further and actually spend out on a reasonable pair of binoculars, Orion is a great place to look at, because under his belt there are fantastic nebulae like the Horsehead Nebula. There are galaxies to be seen. It's a really,
and you can see this through binoculars.
Yes, you can make this out through binoculars. Yes, so
he does have Betelgeuse as well.
Betelgeuse, which is a supergiant, which, to all intents and purposes, is in its death throes. It will die soon, and when we say die soon, we're talking in astronomical terms, somewhere between maybe tomorrow night and a million years, but it is in its final stages, and it will go supernova. And it's predicted when it does go supernova, it's going to be almost like having a second sun in the sky. It's going to be at least as bright as a full moon, if not brighter, for a few weeks. So that's going to be quite the sight. Whether we'll get to see it in our lifetimes or not, I don't know. But no, as you guys say, there are many other constellations. You actually earlier, Krystel, you touched on the Little Dipper, or Ursa Minor, I believe it's technically called. And within Ursa Minor, on the tail of Ursa Minor, is the North Star, which is Polaris. And this is always an incredibly important star for sailors and for navigators and people traveling who live in the Northern Hemisphere, because if you can find the North Star, you always know you're looking true north, so you can always orientate yourself. So yes, there are reasons other constellations are important. And Simon, do you know how to find the North Star? Are you aware of the very easy trick?
I suffer from direction blindness.
Directional blindness. So
tell me.
Well, you obviously know what the Big Dipper looks like. The saucepan, frying pan, Ursa Major, the Great Bear. everybody pretty much, you can look up, if you roughly look northish, if you think you roughly know where north is, you'll find it in the night sky. It's got like a handle bit. So if you imagine it like a frying pan, it's kind of got the handle bit, and then it kind of comes down into like a dish bit, and then it flicks up at the end. And if you look at those two stars that flick up, if you like draw a straight line up, you go up, I don't know, a few degrees, and actually it's just slightly a touch to the left of that straight line is quite a bright star, and that first star you see, that will be Polaris. And if you can find that, even without any GPS, you can amaze your friends by telling them that is true north.
I like it, LP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my phone out, get my Skyview Light app out, which is very useful actually. Not paying me for this, by the way. Point it at the sky and see where it is, because to me, that's been a revelation, having an app on my phone where I can just point it at the sky and move it around, and it shows me where the stars are, and I can press on it and it tells me about them. Have you guys used one of these apps?
Yes. No, obviously when I got into astronomy many years ago, it was all star maps and books, but no, they've revolutionized people's ability just to be able to know what they're looking at in the night sky. And you can kind of zoom in on areas of the night sky and find all sorts of interesting information, and just know where you're actually looking. So yeah, it really has led to an explosion in amateur astronomy. I think it's also worth saying that amateur astronomy is one of the few sciences that really amateurs discover so many things, because the sky is a big object, and even with all the big professional telescopes in the world on tops of mountains, in big science labs, wherever it might be, that they're only looking at very small patches of the sky. So the amateur astronomy field often discovering, little supernovae going off and different things happening everywhere across the night sky, because there's just so many people looking up. And also the technologies that have developed in recent years have reached a point where amateur astronomers are able to capture images pretty much as sharp as professional astronomers could capture with their super telescopes maybe 20 or 30 years ago. They use a software technology to essentially take several pictures of the same objects, and then run a filter that takes the noise of the atmosphere out of those pictures, and it just gives it a sharpness and a clarity that's hard to believe that these pictures were actually taken, like you say, in somebody's back garden. So yeah, pretty amazing job, the amateur astronomy guys.
Now, guys, as I said before, there's been so much going on since we last spoke. Too much to cover right now, but one thing that really did catch my attention, LP, is that life on Venus. What's happening there?
Life on Venus, yeah. I think we should be clear to say that we haven't categorically discovered life on Venus, but there is some interesting evidence that's turned up. Some recent measurements have discovered large amounts of a gas, like a material known as phosphine gas. Now, this is very smelly gas. It stinks of rotten fish. It's not very pleasant at all. However, it's often a byproduct of microbial life, the way it breaks down other microbes and digests. Now, there are other natural phenomena that cause these phosphine gas, but there seems to be an awful lot of this stuff in the clouds of Venus. So we don't know at the moment, but it is an indication that although everybody's been looking at Mars for many years as a place to harbor life, the clouds of Venus may be rich in tiny little microbes for all we know. So it'd be interesting if we can ever actually visit Venus again, to take some samples of the atmosphere and see if we can categorically say yes or no, there is microbial life living on Venus.
So the orbits that the planets go around the sun, have they changed, and has that changed like the conditions on the planet? Is that what's made that difference?
We're not 100% sure, but we believe the current orbits settled down not that long after the formation of the solar system, about 4.5 billion years ago. There is some evidence that maybe there was some movement, and some of the ice giants of Uranus and Neptune moved out further. And we also believe that Venus and Mars were a lot more Earth-like in earlier years, but it was probably more to do with the fact that Venus was right on the inner edge of what's known as the Goldilocks zone, and Mars was right on the outer edge of the Goldilocks zone. That meant that Mars lost its atmosphere and now has a very thin atmosphere. Venus did the opposite, and due to volcanism and other natural phenomenon, the atmosphere got thicker and thicker and thicker until now it's just completely encased in a very dense atmosphere, far denser than Earth, and it's a very hot, dense and inhospitable place, certainly at the ground level. What's interesting with Venus, though, is as you come up through the clouds, I'm not sure the exact altitude, but once you get a few kilometers above the surface, you actually get sort of temperatures that you would see here on Earth. So it stands to reason that it could be a place which we haven't thought about, that can actually harbor life. These aren't going to be, complex beings like humans, but certainly little microbes as we would find here on Earth.
It's quite interesting, actually, the way that they're testing this, because they think they've detected phosphine, but what they're having to do to prove that it is phosphine or prove that the phosphine is created by life is there are chemists here on Earth that are trying to produce phosphine in sufficient amounts in different ways. So they're trying to almost do what science does, really, and sort of like cut off all those other options. Like, could it be this that's producing it? Nope. Could it be this that's producing it? And it's really teaching us a lot about biosignatures of atmospheres and how we detect them, and the difficulty of knowing exactly what you've detected through these things. It's really interesting stuff.
But I'll send you a video link if I haven't sent it before. It's a PBS like mini documentary thing. I think it's about 10 minutes long, just about like actually talking about Venus and how, for some reason, because everybody thinks it's so hostile, it's been completely ignored, and it needs to be explored because it's an complex atmosphere. And NASA are beginning to realize if you could build a cloud city, like Bespin on Empire Strikes Back, where they live in that cloud city, actually that would be a much better place to live than the Martian surface.
Just doesn't have the same ring to it, though, does it? Life on Venus.
Hey, you're part of the problem. You're a hater. I'm bringing Venus back. We need more Venusians. And actually, it's important to say that Mars is about half the size of Earth. It's a very small planet compared, whereas Venus is pretty much the same size. Venus is our true sister planet. Mars is just sort of, I think Mars is a bit like Australia, really. No disrespect to anybody from Australia, but everybody raves on about how great it is. But when you go there, isn't it about 99% red desert? Same with Mars, whereas Venus has got loads of interesting stuff happening.
What an amazing discussion today. I've certainly learned lots again. You guys?
Always learning. Every day's a school day, Simon. Every day's a school day.
No, absolutely. This is why I love it. I may read a lot into science and be passionate about it. But what was that word you used again, Krystel, that I'd never heard before?
Sociocultural astronomy.
There you go. Now, this was a whole new concept that I'm going to run off and do some research on. If all of our listeners also can draw 1, 2, 3 facts from today's program and have a greater understanding of how everything works, then we've again hopefully succeeded in our sort of our mission to inform and educate.
I like to use the facts to impress people.
So all that leads me to say is, join us next time, and goodbye. Thanks for listening. See you guys.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.